Hi boys and girls, it's Mrs. Parisi, and we're going to do our first video today teaching you a new math lesson. So what I'm going to need you to do is make sure you have a pencil with you, and also be sure to have problem set 11 packet in front of you for today's lesson. Alright, so our lesson we're going to be learning today is all about labeling and identifying fractions on a number line using a tape diagram. So you can see with problem 1, we have a tape diagram here. So in order to label our number line, we first need to figure out what our denominator would be. We know our denominator is the total amount of parts all together. So if you look at your tape diagram, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 total parts. So we know on our number line that our denominator is going to be 4. So I'm going to go ahead and label that here. So for this first little tick mark on our number line, I'm going to put a denominator of 4. We're going to leave our numerator open for right now. We're going to go back to that. On our next little tick mark, we're going to put 4 in the denominator. Make sure that as I'm filling this out, that in your packet, you're also filling it out along with me, just like we would in the classroom if I was teaching it on the smartboard. Okay, so that's going to also have 4 in the denominator and 4 in the denominator. Now, in order to figure out our numerator, we know our numerator shows an amount of parts. So right here where this first little tick mark is, it's representing this part of our tape diagram. At this point, this is our starting point of our tape diagram. So this represents 0/4 because it's before it even begins. This next little tick mark represents this whole part right here. So this represents 1/4. Our next little tick mark represents from here all the way to here. So this represents 2/4. After that, we have this next section. So this is going to represent 3/4. And finally, this last section is going to represent 4/4. And if you guys remember, 4/4, we have the same number in the numerator and the denominator. So another way we could write this is 1/2. If you look back at our directions, it says to circle the fraction that labels the point on the number line that also names the shaded part of the tape diagram. So if we look, we only have one shaded part. So we would circle 1/4 because that represents how much of this tape diagram is shaded. All right, I'm going to just pause here for a second. Make sure you have your number line all filled out. That's exactly what we have all right down here. We're going to move on to 1B. Okay, 1B looks like this. We're going to do a little bit of the same thing. First thing I want to do is figure out my denominator. So once again, in order to do that, I need to count how many parts we have in our tape diagram. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have 8 total parts, so that's going to be our denominator. So I'm going to go ahead and fill that in on my number line, wherever you see those little tick marks. Make sure you're doing this on your paper along with me. If at any point I'm going too fast, you can also pause the video you're listening to. And when you pause it, you can kind of fill in and catch up whatever I have written on my screen on your paper as well. All right, looking at this first tick mark, this represents the beginning of our tape diagram. So this is going to represent 0/8. Okay, this next little tick mark represents this first part. So that's going to be 1/8. The next tick mark represents our 2 parts of our tape diagram. So that'll be 2/8. After that, this will be 3/8. We've got 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, and 8/8. Once again, when we have the same number in the numerator and the denominator, we know that 8/8 is another way to write 1/2. Now what I have to do is go back on my labeled number line and circle the fraction that is represented in this tape diagram. So I want you to look at that tape diagram and how many parts are shaded. How much of this tape diagram is shaded? Which fraction represents that? If you said 2/8, you are correct. Go ahead and circle 2/8. All right. What I'm going to have you do next is on 1C, you have a tape diagram and a number line that looks like this. What I want you to do right now is pause the video. I'm going to give you a couple minutes to fill this in on your own. So what you're going to do is you're going to label your number line and then circle the fraction that is represented in the tape diagram above. So go ahead and pause your video and you can go ahead and try to solve this on your own. After you are done, press play and I'll quickly kind of solve it and you can check your work. All right, pause the video. All right, so if you tried to do this on your own, you would see that there were 12 sections. So you knew your denominator was going to be 12 for each of these tick marks. Remember, if you ended up solving this on your own and you made a mistake, you can always pause it and fix it and then press play once you are ready. All right, we knew that this first part was 0/12 because remember that's representing the part before our tape diagram began. Then we had 1/12, 2/12, 3/12, and so on. So make sure you're checking your work that yours look just like mine. I'm hoping that what you did when you got to this point is you wrote that 12/12. Another way to write that is 1. And then finally, remember you were supposed to circle what is shown in the tape diagram, and that was 3/12. So make sure you have that circled as well. All right, for our next problem, you're going to turn the page in your packet and look at question 2A and B. So what we're going to be doing in 2A and B is finding equivalent fractions to some of the fractions that we just labeled on the front on page 1. Okay, so equivalent fractions was actually something we were learning a lot about before we kind of went into quarantine and everything. You guys are doing a fabulous job with that. So for 2A, it says the fraction represented in 1A is equivalent to the fraction represented in 1B. They want us to write a number sentence using multiplication to show that. So we're going back to 1A, that's on page 1. We got the answer of 1/4. For 1B, we got the answer of 2/8. They want us to show how those two fractions are equivalent using multiplication. So let's go back to our problem. So I'm going to write 1/4 to show that this is equal to 2/8. So make sure you're writing that down. When we find equivalent fractions, remember we have to multiply the same number on the top and bottom. So I need to think 1 times what would give me 2. Well, I know 1 times 2 equals 2. Now I have 4 times what gives me 8. And I know that 4 times 2 gives me 8. So this multiplication number sentence right here shows me how 1/4 and 2/8 are equal. So make sure you have that circled and you have that labeled equal. That should look familiar to what we were doing a little bit before in school. Okay, so for 2B, they want us to show how the fraction represented in 1A is equivalent to the fraction represented in 1C. Well, we know 1A, our answer was 1/4. We're going to be using multiplication to figure out how it's equivalent to 1C. So going back to 1C, our answer was 3/12. So that's what we're trying to figure out here. Okay, so 1/4 is equal to 3/12. We're going to do the same thing we just did in 2A. 1 times what gives me 3? 1 times 3 equals 3. 4 times what gives me 12? 4 times 3 gives me 12. So I'm going to circle those two fractions and write how they are equal. Okay, pause the video if you need another minute to kind of copy that down. We're going to go on to the bottom of this page, which is question 3A. So this is going to be very similar to what we did on the front page. The only thing is we're drawing the number line. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to draw a nice straight line underneath the tape diagram. We want to make sure that our start point lines up with the start point of the tape diagram. We want to make sure our end point lines up with the end point of the tape diagram. All right, you can put little arrows at the end as well. And now what we're going to do is we have a line here that represents the beginning. We're going to have to put a line here which represents after the first part. A line here that lines up with the next part. And then once again we have a line at the very end. So you should have a total of 4 lines on your number line that lines up with those parts in the tape diagram. And now we just have to label them. So we know we have a total of 1, 2, 3. So that's going to be our denominator. And now this mark represents 0/3. This mark represents 1/3. This mark represents 2/3. And this last one represents 3/3 or 1 whole. Okay, so pretty much the same thing as that first problem that we did, but instead we drew the number line this time. We're going to go on to 3B. Okay, 3B looks like this. So once again, in order to make a number line, I'm going to draw a straight line that's just as long as my tape diagram above. I'm going to make a tick mark at the end, at the beginning that matches up with the beginning of the tape diagram. I'm going to make a tick mark at the end that lines up with the end of the tape diagram. Then I'm just going to extend my line and put those arrows at the end. Now to fill in the tick marks in the middle of those 2 lines, I'm just going to look at the marks in my tape diagram and line them up. So we got that. There you go. And now I just need to label it. All right, so this is going to be, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's going to be our denominator. Okay, so this first tick mark represents 0, 6. And we have 1, 6, 2, 6, 3, 6, 4, 6, 5, 6, 6, 6, or 1 whole. All right, and then lastly, actually I forgot to do this on the last one, so we'll go back to that. We have to circle which one of these fractions represents how much is shaded up here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 parts shaded, so therefore 4/6 is what is represented in that tape diagram. All right, let's go back to 3A and we'll circle the one up here as well. So for 3A, we had 1, 2 shaded in, so we should have circled 2/3 is represented in 3A. All right, what I'm going to have you do now is I'm going to have you try 3C on your own. So remember, what you're going to have to do is make your number line, make all those little dashes, and then label those dashes and circle how much is shaded. I'm going to have you pause the video now, and you can go ahead and do that. Press play when you're done, and you can check your work with what I'm about to do. All right, so you should have paused your video to try to solve 3C on your own. You can check your work now. So I'm going to draw a line the same length as the tape diagram above. Make my tick marks at the front and the back. Extend and make those arrows because we know it's a line. And then I'm just going to draw the tick marks in between that lines up with the tick marks in the tape diagram. There you go. And then we're going to count how many parts we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So that's our denominator. So I'm going to put that by each of these tick marks. And this one's a little trickier just because there's so many tick marks. You got to make sure you have them all labeled. All right, now we're going to label them. So this first one represents 0 twelfths. Then we have 1 12th, 2 twelfths, 3 twelfths, 4, 5, 6. All right, remember 12 twelfths is another way of saying 1. And then we have to now circle how much is shaded. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 are shaded. So this represents 8 twelfths. Make sure you have that circled as well. If you have any corrections to do on your own paper, make sure that you pause and you can fix your number line so it looks. All right, so next looking at 4A, we are going to be comparing two fractions and once again writing a number sentence to show that they're equivalent using division this time. All right, so we're going to be looking at our answer for 3A and seeing how that's equivalent to our answer for 3B. So we're going to have to go back to that question. Going back to 3A, our answer was 2/3. We're going to see how that is equivalent to our answer for 3B, which was 4/6. Right? So usually when you do division, you want to start with bigger numbers. So because of that, we're going to start by looking at the fraction 4/6. We're going to write our number sentence for division. We're going to show how that is equal to 2/3 using division. Right, so you need to think, what is 4 divided by what would give us 2? Remember, if that's confusing, you could always think of it as a multiplication sentence as well. 2 times what equals 4? Right, so either way, our answer would be 2. So 4 divided by 2 is 2, or going the other way, 2 times 2 is 4. We're going to do the same thing on the bottom. 6 divided by what would give us 3? Right, so 6 divided by 2 would equal 3. Then we're going to circle 4/6 and 2/3 because those are the two fractions that are equivalent or equal. So we're going to write equal after circling those. So for 4B, we're going to do kind of the same thing. We're going to be using fraction, our answer for 3A, and showing how it's equivalent to our answer for 3C. So we're going to have to go back and look at our answer. Okay. For 3C, our answer was 8/12. We already know our answer from 3A was 2/3. Once again, since we're doing division, we're going to start with the fraction that has the bigger number. So we're going to write 2/8, we're going to write the fraction 8/12, and we're going to divide that and show how that is equal to 2/3. So we have to think 8 divided by what would give us 2? 8 divided by 4 would give us 2. And then on the bottom, we're going to think 12 divided by what equals 3? Once again, 12 divided by 4 would give us 3. So this number sentence shows how 8/12 and 2/3 are equal. All right, so what we're going to look at next is 5, question 5. For question 5, there is a part A, B, C. And what I want you to do with question 5 is just put an X over that because we're actually going to skip that for this lesson. Okay, and then turn to the next page. Your next page should look like this. This is your exit ticket, and you know that it's labeled exit ticket. What I want you to do on the exit ticket, this exit ticket is exactly like question 5. So I actually want you to X out your exit ticket. All right, and now boys and girls, I'm going to give you some time to independently work. What you are going to be doing on your own independently is you are going to be looking at the homework. So you have to turn to the next page to be looking at the homework. And what I want you to do is I want you to follow along with me and circle the problems that I want you to complete independently today. So I'm going to want you to complete question 1A, so circle that. Question 1B and question 1C. So your page should look just like this. You're going to complete these 3 problems on your own. After you circle those 3 problems, go ahead and turn to the next page. Okay. What I'm going to have you do on the next page is I want you to do question 2A and 2B. So go ahead and circle those. These problems look exactly like the problems we did together in the problem set. The numbers are just changed. So if you have any difficulty with these, look back at the problem set, and question 1 on the homework and question 1 on the problem set are similar. Question 2 on the homework and question 2 on the problem set are similar, and so on. Okay, so if you get stuck on a question 2, look back at question 2 on the problem set. Okay, for question 3, I want you to circle A, B, and C. I want you to do those on your own. And turn the page. Looking at the last page in your packet, I want you to try question 4. So circle 4. All right, when you get to question 5, A, B, and C, you can cross those out. I do not want you to try those because we didn't go over that in this lesson. All right, once you have these completed, what I'll have you do is you will have your parent or yourself, depending on who's able to do it, take a picture of these problems that you circled and answered independently, and then your parent can email those pictures to me and I can check them and then get back to you with some feedback. If you have any questions or any concerns or anything like that, boys and girls, please let me know because I'm here to help. I miss you guys so much, and I'll see you in our next video.